The snow was already falling when Jason and I pulled into the driveway. It was one of those bitter Kansas nights where the cold didn't just sit on your skin, it tried to burrow into your bones. We were looking forward to a quiet evening at the rental house with our friends. Brad, Heather, and Aaron were already inside. The warmth of the house hit us the moment we opened the door, a sharp contrast to the biting wind outside. We settled in, talking about nothing in particular, the kind of easy, comfortable conversation you have with people who know you well. We had exams coming up, futures to plan, lives that were just starting to take shape. I remember thinking how perfect it felt, safe. Then the door opened. They moved with a sudden, chaotic energy that shattered the calm of the room. Two men, they had guns. The metal looked dull and heavy in the dim light of the living room. I expected shouting demands for money, the usual script of a robbery I had seen in movies, but there was something wrong about their eyes. They weren't just looking for valuables. They were looking at us like we were things they had found, toys they could break if they wanted to. "Get on the floor." The command was low, almost casual. We obeyed. There is a strange paralysis that takes over in moments like that. You think you will fight, you think you will be a hero. But when the barrel of a gun is pointed at the person you love, you become small, you become obedient. I lay on the carpet, the rough fibers pressing against my cheek, listening to the heavy boots thumping around us. I reached out and found Jason's hand. His grip was tight, his palms sweating. It was the only anchor I had. They separated us. That was when the real fear set in, a cold, sinking weight in my stomach that had nothing to do with the winter outside. They took the guys to one room, the girls to another. They wanted money. We gave them everything we had, credit cards, cash, jewelry. It wasn't much. We were students, teachers, young people just starting out. I hoped it would be enough. I prayed they would take the few $100s and leave. But they didn't leave. The hours stretched out, measured not by clocks but by the rhythm of terror. They came back and forth, taunting us. They seemed to feed on our fear. It wasn't about the robbery anymore. It was about power. They made us do things, terrible things to each other. They wanted to break our dignity before they took anything else. I focused on a crack in the ceiling, a water stain that looked like a map of a foreign country. I tried to float out of my body, to be anywhere else but on that floor. I told myself to survive, just survive the next minute, then the next. I heard the guys' voices from the other room, low and pleading, then silence. Then the heavy footsteps returning. Later in the night, they told us to get dressed, but they didn't let us put on our own clothes. They shuffled us around, the logic of their cruelty impossible to follow. Eventually, we were herded toward the garage. The cold air from the open door bit into my exposed skin. They loaded us into the truck. It was Jason's truck. The irony of it was a sharp, stinging pain. We were being driven to our deaths in the vehicle that had taken us on so many happy road trips. We were crammed into the back. It was freezing. The wind whipped against the truck as we drove through the dark streets of Wichita. I was pressed against Heather. She was shaking, her body convulsing with silent sobs. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't move. My hands were bound. I looked at Jason. His face was a mask of despair. He knew, we all knew, this wasn't a ride to release us. This was a one-way trip. The city lights faded, replaced by the crushing darkness of the open fields. The truck bumped over uneven ground, the tires crunching on snow and gravel. We stopped. The silence of the field was immense, broken only by the idling engine and the wind howling through the dry winter grass. "Get out." We stumbled out into the snow. The cold was shocking. It numbed my feet instantly. They marched us into the field. The snow was deep, drifting around our ankles. We were a line of ghosts in the darkness, shivering, broken. They made us kneel. I looked at the line, Brad, Aaron, Jason, Heather, me. We were kneeling in the snow, facing the vast emptiness of the Kansas plains. I could feel the heat radiating from Jason next to me. I wanted to tell him I loved him. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. I couldn't speak. My throat was frozen shut. The first shot cracked the air. It wasn't loud like in the movies. It was a flat, hard snap. I flinched. I didn't look. I heard a body hit the soft snow. Then another snap. And another. I squeezed my eyes shut. I could hear the footsteps crunching in the snow behind us. He was walking down the line, an executioner. I felt Jason's body tense next to me. Then the sound, the terrible, final sound. Jason slumped forward. The warmth of his arm left mine. Then he was behind me. I held my breath. I didn't think about God. I didn't think about heaven. I thought about the cold. I thought about how unfair it was that my life was ending in a snowy soccer field, miles from anyone who cared. The gun went off. The impact was like a hammer blow to the side of my head. A flash of white light exploded behind my eyes. I fell forward into the snow, my face pressed against the icy ground. I waited for the darkness. I waited to die. But the darkness didn't come. I could feel the cold wetness of the snow against my cheek. I could feel the pain, a sharp, searing fire on the side of my head. I was still here. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. My lungs burned with the need for air, but I forced myself to remain still. I was a corpse, I had to be a corpse. They were talking, their voices were muffled, distant. They were laughing. They walked back down the line, checking their work. I heard a thud as one of them kicked something. Please don't kick me. Please don't check me. I let my body go limp, completely surrendering to gravity. The truck doors slammed, the engine revved, the tires spun in the snow, throwing slush and gravel. Then the sound of the truck faded, growing smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the wind. I lay in the silence for a long time. The cold was no longer biting. It was a dull, heavy blanket. I knew if I stayed there, I would die. If the bullet didn't kill me, the winter would. I pushed myself up. My head throbbed with a sickening rhythm. I touched the side of my head. My hand came away warm and wet, blood, but I was moving, I was thinking. The hair clip, the plastic barrette I had worn in my hair, it must have deflected the bullet just enough. It had grazed me, cut me open, but it hadn't gone in. I looked around. The shapes of my friends lay dark against the white snow. I crawled over to Jason. I whispered his name. There was no answer. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. I touched his face. It was already cooling. A scream built in my chest, a primal tearing thawing, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't make noise. They might come back. They might not be far. I stood up. My legs were like jelly, shaking so hard I could barely keep my balance. I was barefoot. The snow was knives against my soles. I looked toward where the truck had gone, then turned the other way. I saw a faint glow in the distance, a light, a house. I started to walk. Every step was a battle. My feet went numb, then started to burn with a phantom heat. I was leaving a trail of blood in the immaculate snow, a red line marking my path of survival. I was naked, exposed to the elements, the wind whipping against skin that was already blue with cold. I walked past the soccer goals, their skeletal frames rising out of the darkness like monuments to a game that belonged to a different world. A world where people played, where they laughed, where they went home safe to warm beds. That world felt a million miles away. The wind picked up, throwing ice crystals into my face. My vision blurred. I stumbled, falling to my knees. The snow felt soft, inviting. It would be so easy to just lie down, to close my eyes, to sleep. The pain would stop. The fear would stop. I could just drift away and be with Jason. No. The anger flared, sudden and hot. They did this. They took everything. They thought they had won. They thought they had left 5 bodies in a field to be buried by the snow. If I died here, they won. If I died, no one would know who they were. No one would know what they did to us. I forced myself up. I dragged one foot in front of the other. The light in the distance seemed to mock me, never getting any closer. I don't know how long I walked. It felt like hours. It felt like a lifetime. The sensation in my feet was gone. I was walking on stumps. Eventually, the ground changed. The soft crunch of the field gave way to the hard, unyielding surface of a road. Pavement. I was closer. The light was a street lamp. Beyond it, a house. I ran, or I tried to run. It was a shambling, broken lurch. I reached the porch. The wood was rough under my frozen feet. I found the door and pounded on it. My hands were so cold I could barely make a fist. "Help me, please." My voice was a croak, a broken whisper. I kept hitting the door. I heard movement inside. A light flicked on. The lock turned. The door opened. A woman stood there, her face shifting from confusion to horror as she took me in. I must have looked like a monster. Covered in blood, naked, blue-skinned, wild-eyed. She didn't slam the door, she didn't scream. She reached out, she pulled me inside. The warmth of the house hit me like a physical blow. It was overwhelming. I collapsed onto the entryway floor. The rug was soft, the air smelled of cinnamon and heating oil. "They shot my friends," I managed to say. "They shot everyone." The woman was shouting for her husband. She was wrapping a blanket around me. It was scratchy and heavy and the most beautiful thing I had ever felt. I could hear her on the phone. 911, yes, a girl, she's been shot, hurry. I lay there, the adrenaline finally fading, leaving behind a vast, dark emptiness. I closed my eyes and I saw the field again. I saw the snow, I saw Jason. I survived. I was the one who walked out of the snow. But as I lay there in the safety of a stranger's hallway, listening to the approaching sirens, I knew that a part of me was still out there in the dark, kneeling in the cold, waiting for a bullet that would never land. The silence of that field would live in my head forever. I would testify, I would point my finger at them. I would make sure they never saw the sky again. That was the only thing left, the only purpose. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling. It was white, pristine, unbroken, not like the water-stained map in the other house. I took a breath. It rattled in my chest. I was alive. I was alive. The darkness of the bedroom was usually a comfort. It was the soft, heavy blanket that settled over the house after the noise of the day had faded. My little sister breathing in the bed next to mine was a rhythmic anchor, a sound that meant safety and family and the ordinary peace of a Wednesday night in June. I was asleep, drifting in that deep, weightless place where dreams haven't quite formed yet. Then the door opened. It wasn't a loud noise, it was the subtle shift of air pressure, the faint groan of a hinge that hadn't been oiled in years. I opened my eyes, expecting to see my father checking on us, or maybe one of my brothers sleepwalking. But the shadow standing by the door wasn't familiar. It was wrong. It was too still, too intent. I lay frozen, my heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. The shadow moved. It drifted across the carpet, silent as smoke. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell for my dad, whose room was just down the hall, but my throat paralyzed. The figure was standing over me now. I could smell him. It was a stale, sour odor of unwashed clothes and old sweat and something metallic. He leaned down. The moonlight filtering through the blinds caught the glint of a knife. The blade looked impossibly long, calm and cold in the dim light. "Be quiet," he whispered. "I have a knife. If you make a sound, I will kill you and your family." The threat was absolute. It wasn't angry. It was stated like a fact, like saying the sun would rise or the rain would fall. I looked at the knife, then at his eyes, which were hollow pits in the darkness. I thought of my parents sleeping down the hall. I thought of my sister, Mary Catherine, just feet away, feigning sleep, her breathing hitched and shallow. I knew she was awake. I knew she was terrified. "Get up, put on your shoes." I moved like a marionette, my strings pulled by the terror radiating from the man in black. I slid out of the warmth of my bed. The floor was cool under my feet. I pulled on my red sneakers, my hands shaking so violently I could barely manage the laces. Every movement felt loud in the silence of the house. I waited for the floorboards to creak, for a door to open, for someone to save me. But the house slept on. He took my arm, his grip was hard, his fingers digging into my bicep. He led me out of my room, down the familiar hallway where family photos hung in the dark, past the open door of my parents' room. I could hear my father's soft snoring. It was the most painful sound I had ever heard. I was walking away from my life, step by silent step. We went out the back door. The night air was cool, a stark contrast to the stifling fear inside. He led me into the backyard, past the swing set, past the garden. We didn't stop at the fence. We went up. The mountain rose behind our house, a looming black shape against the starry sky. He pushed me forward. The path was steep and rocky. Scrub oak tore at my pajamas. The higher we climbed, the smaller my house became. I looked back once. The windows were dark. It looked so peaceful, so unaware that I was being stolen from it. "Don't look back," he said. We hiked for hours. My legs burned, my chest heaved. I stumbled over roots and rocks, but he yanked me up, relentless. We were climbing into the wilderness, leaving civilization behind. The lights of Salt Lake City spread out below us, a grid of amber and white that seemed a million miles away. We reached a camp. It was nothing more than a few tarps and some sleeping bags hidden in a thicket of trees. A woman was there. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked at me with a flat, empty expression. "This is your new home," the man said. That was the beginning of the erasure. They took my name. They told me I was no longer the girl who played the harp and ran track. I was a vessel for their delusion. They dressed me in robes. They tethered me to a tree with a steel cable, like a dog. The days bled into nights. I lived in a state of constant, suffocating fear. The man who called himself a prophet ranted for hours about God and destiny. He read from scriptures, twisting the words until they justified the horror he was inflicting on me. I learned to be invisible. I learned that if I was quiet, if I was compliant, the violence might be less severe. I sat in the dirt, watching the sun move across the sky. I could sometimes hear the sounds of the city below. Sirens, traffic, life continuing without me. I wondered if they were looking for me. I wondered if they thought I was dead. I prayed they didn't. I prayed they kept looking. Hunger became a constant companion. We ate scraps, whatever they could steal or scavenge. I grew thin. My hair grew matted. The girl in the mirror, if I had one, would have been a stranger. One day, he said we were moving. We packed the meager camp and began to walk. We didn't go further into the mountains. We went down. We walked right into the city. I was terrified. I thought someone would see us. I thought someone would recognize the girl from the news. But he made me wear a veil, a thick white cloth that covered my face, leaving only a slit for my eyes. We walked through crowds. I brushed shoulders with people who were buying groceries, people who were rushing to work. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear off the veil and shout my name, but his voice was always in my ear, a whisper of venom. If you say a word, I will kill them. I will kill your family. The threat was a leash tighter than any cable. I walked with my head down, a ghost in the middle of the day. We sat in parks. We went to the library. I saw my face on a newspaper once, lying on a bench, missing. The word was black and bold. I stared at my own smile, an artifact from a past life. I touched the paper, my finger tracing the letters. Don't touch that, the woman hissed. We traveled. We hitchhiked to California. We lived on the streets, sleeping under bridges, eating out of dumpsters. I became feral. Survival was the only instinct left. I learned to read his moods, to anticipate his anger. I learned to disappear inside myself when the reality became too much to bear. I built a wall in my mind, a fortress where the real me was hiding, waiting. Winter came and went, then spring. I lost track of time. I didn't know what month it was. I only knew the cold of the pavement and the heat of the sun. The man became more brazen. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he had broken me completely. And maybe he had. I didn't try to run anymore. I didn't try to signal for help. I was tired, a bone-deep exhaustion that made even hope feel heavy. We returned to Utah. The mountains were snow-capped, familiar and cruel. We were walking down a street in a suburb just miles from where I had been taken. I was wearing a wig now and sunglasses and the robes. We looked like a carnival act, a trio of madness walking through the orderly streets. A police car drove slowly past us. I didn't look up. I expected it to keep going, just like all the others. But it stopped. Two officers got out. They stepped onto the sidewalk, blocking our path. My heart started that old, frantic rhythm. "Stop right there," one officer said. The man started to talk. He launched into his usual speech about religious freedom, about his rights. He was loud, arrogant. He tried to bully them with words. The officer ignored him. He looked at me. He looked hard. "What is your name?" he asked. I couldn't speak. The threat was there, a knife at my throat even though the blade was nowhere in sight. I shook my head. "Lift up your sunglasses," the officer said. I hesitated. The man stepped forward, trying to intervene. The other officer put a hand on his chest, pushing him back. "Do it," the officer said to me. His voice was firm but not unkind. I reached up. My hands were trembling. I lifted the glasses. The sun was bright. I blinked against the glare. The officer stared at me. He looked at the picture he was holding, then back at me. He leaned in closer. "You look a lot like Elizabeth Smart," he said. The name hit me like a physical blow. It was a name I hadn't heard spoken with kindness in 9 months. It was a name that belonged to a girl who slept in a soft bed and went to school. "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" The man was glaring at me. His eyes promised death. He was silently willing me to lie, to say no, to say I was his daughter, his wife, his property. But the officer was there. He was real. He had a gun on his hip and a badge on his chest. He was the wall between me and the monster. I looked at the man, then I looked at the officer. The fear was still there, a towering monolith, but something else was rising comfortably beside it, a desperate, clawing need to be found, to be real again. I took a breath. The air tasted of exhaust and spring flowers. "Yes," I whispered. The word was so quiet I wasn't sure he heard it. "What?" he asked. "I am Elizabeth Smart," I said. The world seemed to stop. The sounds of the traffic faded. The man shouted something, but it was distant, muffled. The officers moved. They separated me from him. They put him in handcuffs. They put the woman in handcuffs. I stood alone on the sidewalk. The sun was warm on my face. I wasn't tethered. I wasn't hidden. They put me in the back of the police car. It smelled of plastic and coffee. It was the safest place I had ever been. We drove away. I watched the man through the rear window. He was growing smaller, just a figure on the side of the road, powerless. I didn't cry. I sat very still. I watched the houses pass by. Ordinary houses with manicured lawns and fences. Houses where families lived. I was going home. The mountains rose in the distance, silent witnesses to the months I had lost. I touched the window glass. It was cool and solid. "I am Elizabeth Smart," I said to the empty car. I said it again, louder. "I am Elizabeth Smart." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The humid Louisiana air clung to my skin even inside the house. It was July in Baton Rouge, and the heat was a constant, oppressive presence. I was used to it, though. I moved through my small home, the familiar creak of the floorboards a comfort as I checked on my son in the next room. He was asleep, oblivious to the news reports that had the whole city on edge. A serial killer was on the loose, 5 women dead, all of them attacked in their homes. But I told myself what everyone tells themselves: it won't happen to me. I went to the kitchen to start dinner. The rhythm of chopping vegetables was soothing. Then, a knock at the door broke the silence. It wasn't a frantic pounding, just a steady, deliberate rap. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the front door, peering through the small glass pane. A man stood there. He looked ordinary, handsome even. He was dressed neatly, not like the monsters they described on TV. He smiled when he saw me, a charming, disarming smile. "Hi," he said through the door. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm lost. Could I use your phone? My car broke down just up the road." I hesitated. The warnings flashed in my mind: don't open the door to strangers. But he looked so polite, so helpless. And it was broad daylight. My neighbor was just across the street. "I can make the call for you," I offered, keeping the chain lock on. "Please, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth. "It's my boss I need to call. It's complicated. I'll just be a minute. I really don't want to lose my job over a dead battery." I looked at him again. He seemed harmless, a working man having a bad day. My compassion, that fatal flaw of Southern hospitality, won out. I undid the chain. "Okay," I said, opening the door. "The phone's in the kitchen." He stepped inside, and the air in the room seemed to change instantly. The charm evaporated. He closed the door behind him, and the click of the latch sounded like a gunshot. He didn't move toward the kitchen. He moved toward me. His eyes, which had been warm a moment ago, were now flat and dead. He didn't speak. He just lunged. I stumbled back, knocking over a vase on the entry table. It shattered, the sound echoing in the small house. He was on me in a second. His hands were strong, rough. He grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the wall. Stars exploded in my vision. "Don't scream," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "Don't you dare scream." Fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over me. This was him, the man from the news, the Baton Rouge serial killer, and I had let him in. "Please," I gasped, tasting blood. "My son, he's in the other room. Please don't hurt him." He didn't seem to hear me. He dragged me toward the bedroom. I fought. I scratched at his arms, kicked at his shins. I was fighting for my life, for my son's life. He was stronger, heavier. He threw me onto the bed. He pulled a cord from his pocket, a telephone cord. I recognized the weapon from the news reports. He was going to strangle me. Panic gave way to a primal, desperate rage. I wouldn't die like this. Not here, not with my baby in the next room. I kicked him hard in the chest as he leaned over me. He gruntled, stumbling back a step. I scrambled off the bed, grabbing a heavy lamp from the nightstand. I swung it with everything I had. It connected with his shoulder with a satisfying thud. He roared in anger, not pain. He came at me again, faster this time. He tackled me to the floor. His hands found my throat. His thumbs dug into my windpipe. The world started to go gray at the edges. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at his face, my nails digging into his skin. I wanted to leave a mark. I wanted them to find his DNA under my fingernails if I died. Then a sound cut through the struggle. A car door slamming outside, footsteps on the porch. My son's father, he was coming to pick him up. The killer froze. He looked toward the front door, his grip loosening just slightly. "Someone's here," I choked out, a whisper of defiance. "They'll catch you." He looked back at me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The footsteps got closer. The front door handle jiggled. It was locked. "Diane," a voice called out, "you in there?" The killer scrambled off me. He didn't say a word. He ran. He bolted out the back door, crashing through the screen, disappearing into the humid afternoon. I lay on the floor, gasping for air, my throat burning. I heard the front door being kicked in. Then he was there, lifting me up, shouting my name. "He's gone," I whispered. "He's gone." I survived, but as the police swarmed my house, taking photos of the bruises on my neck and the shattered lamp, I knew the nightmare wasn't over. I had seen his face. I was the only one who had seen his face and lived. I spent the next few days in a daze of police interviews and hospital visits. I described him over and over. The charm, the dead eyes, the way he moved. I worked with a sketch artist, detailing every line of his face, every shadow. "Are you sure?" the detective asked, holding up the drawing. "That's him," I said, my voice trembling but certain. "That's Derek Todd Lee." My description led them to him. It connected the dots. It gave a face to the monster. I sat in the courtroom months later, watching him. He didn't look charming anymore. He looked small, pathetic, but when he turned and looked at me, I saw it again. The darkness. He will never hurt anyone else. I made sure of that. I opened the door to a killer, but I was the one who closed the book on him. I went home. The house was quiet. I locked the door. I checked the windows. I checked on my son, sleeping peacefully. I sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had been chopping vegetables. I picked up the knife. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it. Then I put it down. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor, and I would never, ever be helpless again. The house in Maryland always felt like a sanctuary, especially at night when the woods surrounding it were draped in shadows. It was just another Tuesday evening in 2003. My wife, Sarah, was upstairs putting our two kids to bed. I was in the living room, winding down with a book, the silence of the house broken only by the occasional creak of settling timber. Then the front door exploded inward. It wasn't a knock or a polite entrance. It was a violent crash that sent splinters flying. Before I could process the noise, two men were in the room. They wore black masks, their movements sharp and aggressive. One held a pistol, the other a shotgun. The barrel of the shotgun leveled at my chest, a black eye staring into my soul. "Don't move on the floor now." The command barked out, harsh and guttural. I scrambled off the couch, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I hit the carpet, my hands instinctively going behind my head. "Where is everyone else?" the one with the pistol demanded, pressing the cold metal against the back of my neck. "My wife, my kids, upstairs," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Please don't hurt them." He ignored me, shouting for his partner to go up. I heard heavy boots thumping on the stairs, then Sarah's scream, a terrifying sound that cut through me. The kids started crying. The noise was chaotic, a symphony of fear that filled the house. They dragged Sarah and the kids down. The man with the shotgun herded them into the living room. My son, barely 5, was clinging to his mother's leg, his eyes wide with terror. My daughter, 3, was sobbing into Sarah's shirt. "Shut them up," the gunman roared. Sarah was trying to soothe them, her own voice shaking. "It's okay, SHH, it's okay." But nothing was okay. They separated us. They shoved Sarah and the kids into the hall closet. I heard the door slam, then the muffled sounds of my family's distress. It was a small mercy, perhaps, that they wouldn't see what was about to happen to me. The two men turned their attention back to the living room. They wanted money, jewelry, anything of value. I told them where everything was, my wallet on the counter, Sarah's purse by the door, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. "We want the safe," the pistol man hissed, leaning close. "Where's the safe?" "We don't have a safe," I pleaded. "We don't. Please take whatever you want, just leave us alone." He stepped back and kicked me in the ribs. The pain was sharp, breathless. I gasped, curling into a ball. "Liar." They tore the house apart. Drawers were yanked out, their contents spilled onto the floor. Books were swept off shelves. Lamps were smashed. It was a frenzy of destruction, but they kept coming back to me, convinced I was hiding something. They tied me to a chair in the dining room. Duct tape bit into my wrists and ankles. One of them went to the kitchen. I heard the drawer open, the rattle of cutlery. He came back with a knife, a steak knife from our wedding set. He held it up to the light. "Last chance, the safe." I sobbed. "I swear there is no safe." He didn't believe me. He brought the knife down, not to stab, but to burn. He had a lighter in his other hand. He heated the blade until the metal darkened, then he pressed it against my leg. The scream was involuntary, a raw tear in my throat. The smell of burning flesh filled the room, acrid and sickening. I thrashed against the bonds, but they held firm. "Where is it?" This went on for hours. The pain came in waves, searing and relentless. They beat me. They poured bleach onto the burns, the chemical sting adding a new layer to the agony. I started to drift, the room spinning, the faces of my tormentors blurring into demonic masks. I thought I was going to die in that chair. I thought about Sarah and the kids in the closet, praying they were safe, praying they couldn't hear me. Then abruptly it stopped. The house fell silent. "Let's go," one of them muttered. They grabbed a pillowcase filled with our belongings, an Xbox, some jewelry, a few $100s in cash. They walked out the front door as quickly as they had entered, leaving the ruin of my life behind them. I waited 1 minute, 5 minutes. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Sarah," I rasped, my voice a wreck. "John," her voice came from the closet, muffled and terrified. "Are they gone?" "I think so," I whispered. "Stay there, just stay there." I fought against the tape. My hands were slick with sweat and blood. I twisted my wrists, ignoring the pain until I felt the adhesive give way. I ripped my hands free, then my feet. I stumbled to the closet and wrenched the door open. Sarah fell into my arms, weeping. The kids clung to us, silent now, too scared to cry. We huddled together on the floor of the wrecked hallway, a tangle of limbs and fear. I managed to call 911. The police arrived within minutes, lights flashing against the dark trees outside, but the men were gone, vanished into the night. We survived. Physically I healed. The burns scarred over, the bruises faded, but the house never felt safe again. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner brought the terror rushing back. We moved a month later. Sometimes late at night I wake up sweating, the smell of burnt skin in my nose. I check the doors, I check the windows, I check on Sarah and the kids. They are safe, we are safe. But in the quiet of a Maryland night, I know that safety is an illusion, a fragile glass that can shatter in an instant. And I know there are monsters who walk among us, masked and ruthless, waiting for a door to be unlocked. The Idaho night was vast and swallowed sound. Our house, tucked away near Coeur d'Alene, felt like a fortress against the dark, a place of laughter and noise where my brothers, Dylan and baby Slade, my mom and her fiancé, Mark, created a chaotic, wonderful world. I was Shasta. I was 8 years old. The biggest worry I had was usually about which game we'd play next or what was for dinner. That night changed everything. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the wind in the pines or the settling of the house. It was a thud, a heavy, wet sound, then a scream that was cut short. I sat up, clutching my blanket. The hallway light flicked on, casting a long, jagged shadow under my door. I heard footsteps, heavy boots on the hardwood floor, not Mark's, not Mom's. The door to my room burst open. A man stood there. He was big, wearing dark clothes and night vision goggles that made him look like a monster from a video game. He held a hammer. It was dripping. "Get up," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. I scrambled out of bed, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack them. "Where's Mom?" I whispered. He didn't answer, he just pointed the hammer at the door. "Out." I walked into the hallway. The smell hit me first. It was metallic and sharp, blood. I saw Mark lying on the floor. He wasn't moving. There was so much red. I looked away, tears stinging my eyes. "Don't look," the man ordered. He herded me into the living room. Dylan was there, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. He was holding Slade. My baby brother was crying, a high, thin wail that grated on my nerves. "Sit," the man commanded. We sat on the couch. The man paced back and forth, the hammer swinging loosely in his hand. He was talking to himself, muttering things I couldn't understand, about demons, about souls. "Where is Mom?" I asked again, louder this time. He stopped pacing and looked at me. He took off the goggles. His eyes were cold, dead things. "She's gone," he said. "They're all gone. Only the chosen remain." My stomach dropped. Gone. Mark was dead. Mom, was she dead too? And my older brother, Slate. He spent hours in the house. He made us watch as he packed things. He ate our food. He acted like he lived there. It was a nightmare that wouldn't end. Then, just before dawn, he told us we were leaving. "We have a journey to take," he said. He took us outside. The air was crisp and cold. He forced us into a stolen car. Dylan and I sat in the back. Slade was gone. I didn't ask where. I knew. The silence in the house told me everything. We drove for what felt like days, into the mountains, into the wilderness of Montana. He took us to a campsite deep in the Lolo National Forest. It was beautiful in a cruel way. Tall trees, a rushing stream, but it was a prison. For weeks we lived in a tent with the monster. His name was Joseph Duncan. He made us call him Jet. He told us he was saving us from a corrupt world. He hurt us, in ways I didn't have words for then and barely have words for now. Dylan tried to protect me. He was only 9, but he was brave. He would stand between me and Duncan. He would whisper stories to me at night when Duncan was asleep, stories about our family, about how we would escape. But Duncan saw his defiance. One day he took Dylan away. They went for a walk in the woods. I waited by the fire, poking at the embers with a stick, praying. Duncan came back alone. He had a gun in his waistband. He looked at me and I knew. My brother, my protector, was gone. "It's just us now, Shasta," he said, "you and me." I was alone, the only survivor of my family. The weight of it crushed me. I wanted to lie down and never get up, but a voice in my head, maybe my mom's, maybe Dylan's, told me to keep going. Survive, Shasta, survive. I played his game. I smiled when he wanted me to smile. I listened to his ramblings about the end of the world. I became invisible, a ghost in his twisted fantasy. He started talking about leaving the woods, about going back to civilization. He wanted to go to a Denny's. He missed pancakes. We drove back into the world, people, cars, buildings. I stared out the window, desperate to catch someone's eye, but I was terrified. He said he would kill me if I said a word. He said he had bombs. He said he was watching me always. We walked into a Denny's in Coeur d'Alene. It was surreal. The smell of bacon and coffee, the clinking of silverware, families eating breakfast, and me, sitting across from the man who murdered my family. The waitress came over. She looked at me. She looked at him. She frowned. Are you Shasta grown?" she asked, her voice trembling. The restaurant went silent. Everyone turned to look. Duncan froze. His hand went to his pocket, but he didn't pull the gun. He looked around at the people staring at him. He saw the recognition in their eyes. "Yes," I whispered, "I'm Shasta." The waitress backed away. "I'm calling the police." Duncan stood up, but it was too late. People were standing up all around us, blocking the door, watching him. The police arrived within minutes. Sirens wailed outside, a beautiful screaming sound. They burst in, guns drawn. "Get down on the ground." Duncan didn't fight, he just knelt, his hands on his head. An officer rushed to me. He picked me up. He was crying. "It's okay, honey," he said. "We've got you. You're safe." I buried my face in his shoulder. I smelled his uniform, sweat and starch. It was the smell of safety. I survived. I was the only one. My mom, Mark, Slate, Dylan. They were all gone, but I was here. I had walked out of the woods. Years later, I testified against him. I looked him in the eye and told the world what he did. I made sure he would never hurt anyone again. But sometimes when the wind blows through the trees at night, I'm back in that tent. I'm 8 years old, waiting for my brother to come back from a walk in the woods, and I have to remind myself over and over, I am Shasta, I am alive, and that is enough.